Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Altitude. I, of course, am your host, Woody Woodworth. Super cool show today. We are going to talk all about the trials and tribulations and the dark art of troubleshooting enterprise networks, especially cloud networks. And to help us with that subject, we have a real expert on the show today. We have Tchimwa Sougang, who is a cloud networking engineer for none other than Azure and has spent a good part of his career troubleshooting some of the biggest, baddest networks in the land. So, Tchimwa, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ray, thank you for having me today. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, man, there's so much ground to cover. Let's start out with this. You work for one of the biggest cloud providers in the world. What is it like to help customers troubleshoot their networks at Azure in the cloud?
It's always exciting because with customer, especially with the cloud, you always get like a new case scenario every single time of day. So you learn as much as you can. And what actually excites me the most about our customer is when they open the case, most of the time, they think they have a clue about what is the issue. Yeah. And he ended up not being even close to what they think about. So even for us, sometimes they bring some issue or some scenario that you never thought about it. And it's always a learning from both sides. So that's actually what drives me every day. Yeah. I like working with customers just because of that, because every single time I will get a challenge.
Do you see any patterns or issues that repeat themselves over and over again? And by this, I don't mean, say, the network stack in Azure breaks in the same way, but that customers come to you with a similar kind of problem that you can solve because they didn't implement it right or they don't understand it right. What are the kind of common repetition scenarios that you see with your customers?
I think you actually nailed them with both that you said, because both actually are the reason why they come when they keep coming back at the same time. Sometimes they didn't set it up right, or sometimes there's definitely something that's not supported. Yeah. But most of the time, we always try to find a common ground and see or work around. Yeah, to accommodate the customer. But the main scenario is they didn't implement it right, or what they're trying to do is actually not supported most of the time.
What do you think customers could do to help improve that? I mean, obviously there's training and education and all these
hmm
things, but it sounds like based on just what we've been talking about, what they need is a more comprehensive approach to maybe building and supporting or managing cloud networks, right? So we've talked a lot on the show about a knowledge gap,
hmm
especially in the networking area. And it sounds like that trickles over into the troubleshooting piece as well, that it's not that cloud networks are necessarily breaking anymore or
hmm
less than data center networks, but really people are kind of building them or architecting them in the wrong ways. Is that true?
Is actually true, because even the limitation, where does it come from when we say like it's not supported or it's not building well? Where does it come from? Is always we're talking about net knowledge gap, right? And sometimes it's not really the knowledge, right? Let's say I'm a network engineer that used to work on infrastructure, okay, and I have this bug cloud thing that I need to build up. Like, you're always going to go with your experience that you had before, okay, and you build it on the concept that it's just going to work the same way that it works on infrastructure. And
Hmm.
it's not just that how it works. It's not true, right? You start building all these things. At some point, you kind of stop because some that usually work on infrastructure doesn't work on the cloud. And that's actually where the issue kicks in. And when it kicks in, sometimes there's not really an advanced case scenario on the documentation showing that, okay, this is how you can build it. Because most of the time there's a workaround, right? But you have to be, let's say, an expert to kind of understand or explain to the customer, like, okay, maybe if you tweak this and you tweak that part, okay, if you play on the IS path or you route on-prem, you can bypass this. If you play with local preference, you can work your way out of this. This is just like something that you kind of see with VPN. That's an example, right? But hey, most of the time, it has to do with like process, not only knowledge gap. Because if you have actually, even if they're knowledgeable, like they learn about that cloud thing and they kind of know like, okay, the file will work this way. The way to actually build it, because designing is a totally different thing. If you don't use the right design based on a cloud architect or the cloud provider, you're going to fail.
Hmm.
I don't know if you have all the knowledge in the word, you're going to fail. So we still have that ground, okay, where people need to take their way out of the infrastructure side where they were accustomed to and work their way up to the cloud. It just is not just involved in the network team, even the application team is different because they have to understand now, okay, what type of information do I have to provide to my DevOps guy or to my cloud architect guy so all this can mesh together and work seamless?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite some work to do there, definitely.
So, yeah, I think you mentioned something really important just a little earlier, and that's about expectations, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
that there's an expectation that things will work out in a particular way, or that the cloud network will work in a particular way. But in fact, it doesn't. So, what do you think is driving this misunderstanding or this false expectation that, the network is going to behave in a certain kind of way? Are people coming to it and just believing that it's going to be like Cisco in the cloud and they're going to get all of these full capabilities and deep offerings and deep visibility in this stuff? Or is it just that they know kind of what they're getting into, that cloud will be different, but they just don't understand that difference?
Two things. There's actually two things. Some is just a human nature, right? I used to do this for 15 years. So it's just going to work. It's going to work. So let me set up this way and then it probably going to work. So yeah, and they just go ahead and start building it. Like, okay, the way they understand it and the way they are accustomed to, and it doesn't work, right? The other thing is just like, they think they know how to manage their way to that cloud, right? And they just figure out now, okay, I was wrong about this and I'm wrong about this one. If I take just a simple example, right? A private link or private endpoint is probably something that works with most of the past service, okay?
Mhm.
But if the way we set up the private link or the private endpoint for a storage account is totally different. How you set up a private endpoint for Synapse, the requirements are different. The way you set up private endpoints for function, the way is different. And there's some concept behind that customers are really not really fully aware with, because when you come and tell them like, okay, your pass is on the internet and your a private endpoint actually open the door to actually access that pass privately, they still don't get it. Like this VPN in the middle, you just because, and that VPN part become why the past experience. Because if you didn't do that, you need some type of thing like that. So, right. So there's always that kind of thing, but you're going to find some customer that will embrace the challenge and learn. Okay. And you have some like, it's just hard for them to understand like a function on a web app, private endpoint, the inbound has nothing to do with the outbound because they're accustomed to one box, one single card in and out on the same single card, right? So,
Right.
when you tell him like, hey, if you're going to set up a private endpoint on this, you're going to make, you can access it privately, but he told you like, no, I still need to go to anything. I'm like, no, it has nothing to do. It's still confusing for them. So you have to set up the inbound and make sure you probably do a VNet integration on the outbound and kind of filter your traffic going into the VNet and the other one going to internet. So you explain it to them, you provide documentation, and you ask them to level up and to kind of understand exactly where they're going. But that human nature, right? The human nature always kicks in first and try to fight. Yeah. But I think we all go through that, okay? Because it's a change. This example that I give you, there's probably 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
Same service, but the way to set up with other one is totally different. It's not because you work with the storage that is the same way you're going to work with Synapse or function or all that kind of thing. And you see it.
So a couple things going on there, right? Deep complexity.
Yeah.
Services have small differences in the way that you configure them and change them up. So what you learn for one kind of pattern will not neatly apply to another. So you kind of have to learn each of these motions individually. So there's a lot of complexity there. But also, I think at a more deeper level, I think engineers and architects across the board, but especially in networking, have been trained and schooled to be control freaks. Because
Yep.
if you're not in control of your network, you're going to be you're cruising for a bruising, as we say, right? Like
Oh,
it's all
definitely.
about control because the network is such a key service, right? It's ring zero, as we say, network or no work.
Network or nowhere.
So it's hard, I think, for engineers who are new to the cloud or new to a particular cloud to come in and not be able to see and to feel how each precise connection works, right? Because a lot of it, to your point, like with private link, which for our listeners who may not be familiar, binds a public PaaS or SaaS service to a private IP that lives in your private network or VNet. What happens between that private endpoint and that PaaS service is cloud magic.
Yep.
Now, actually, because of my former role, I know what's happening under the covers, but it's not important in the day-to-day life of an engineer. And if they need to troubleshoot that, or if they need to have visibility into that, they need to call someone like you and
Yes.
have you explain to them all of the ins and outs of it. What's the performance characteristics? Why isn't it bidirectional? Why can't you open a connection from the PaaS service into the VNet through a private link? Because it doesn't work like traditional networking. So what I mean to say with all this is that sometimes it's not just the technical part, it's the emotional part of not being able to understand and control the network. And this leads to frustration. This leads to misconfiguration. This leads to error, because no one in the network likes guesswork. It's hard for us.
And something that I probably forgot to mention, you need to trust too, right? You need to trust too. Yeah, you need to trust, because I've seen this with a lot of customers, right? Like, how am I going to trust you guys? Like, okay, that connection is actually private. Yeah. How am I going to trust you? Like, that connection is going to be private. If I take just an example, right? Basically, we have a front door right now. You connect to storage account using a private link. Normally, the recommendation as security for storage account is your block should be set up as private on the block level. And in the WIS level, right, it should be set up as private. And you can actually set up as private if you locked up all the internet and everything is just accessing private endpoints. It's not going to work, right? But a requirement for front door to connect to that storage account, even using private link, your block needs to be set up. The anonymous access needs to be set up to public.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a requirement. So the customer is like, okay, you're telling me like this is private. Why my block has to stay public?
I see.
Yeah.
So hence the phone call, hence the troubleshooting effort, hence the
lack of visibility. Lack of visibility. It kind of create that little break with trust, Yeah. You remain on your cloud provider word, basically telling you like this is private, nothing else. That's the only thing you have. You cannot see it.
So definitely there's a lot of troubleshooting and a lot of quote unquote break fix around people standing up new services, building new things. But then there's a whole other part of troubleshooting, as you know, which is I've built a thing and there's something terribly wrong with it, right? Which is that higher priority P0, P1 kind of thing. So switching gears a little bit, I have talked a lot about this on the show before, but we have done a comprehensive survey of networking and security professionals, summing up across 400 individuals, their experiences with cloud networks over the last year, 2023. And we got some startling facts out of that. One, which is that according to our responders, that 47% of outages in the network were caused by human error.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about your take on that. Do you see when you're on the call on the bridge and the customer saying my application is down hard, do you see, and I know that, it's hard to put you on the spot. So this is less a quantitative discussion, more of a qualitative discussion. Do you often find that human error is the result of that? Like they just didn't optimize the service correctly. They didn't build it right. What I'm going for is in the cloud are a lot of these big outages that customers talk about. Is it really due to the fact that they just didn't optimize it or configure it correctly versus the cloud provider itself actually failing?
Okay. So the blame is shared here. Okay. To be honest, the blame is shared, right? So as every single network, you'll have your downtime, right? You always have your downtime. So even the cloud provider will have his downtime. And when it happened, customers are affected. I think the really issue is sometimes in the communications, because when it happened, this is the side where the cloud provider is actually in a failure, right? When it happened, sometimes it takes time to notice the customer, or sometimes the customer has to open a case to actually find out that something is going on. That can happen. Is actually happening. Not that can happen. It's actually happening. And you got to go over there and look at the materials or the fabrics and say, okay, there's something going on your device. And then, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it. And that's on the cloud provider part. Now, when it comes to customer, the human error comes to, okay, let's talk about something that we can control, because we cannot mention anything like about being tired or whatever, because this is not factual. That's actually something is subjective. Right. If we go, what is actually factual is a lack of automations first, to be honest. Lack of automations. You see the control freak that we usually have on infrastructure level, there's not that much. I don't actually think that people are not accustomed to, so they don't really know how to actually build that control thing. Like, how do I actually build it from A to B and have a control from A to B? It's not like it's not possible. It's actually possible. But maybe they're still, since it's a new thing for them, they're still lacking on knowledge, or a lacking practice of that, right? Because you have customer opening cases, asks you, something happened on this, and we know that somebody make a change at that time, around that time. You have to take it from them. We can go to the portal and just go to activity labs and find out, right? But it doesn't know that. So there's a knowledge gap at that level. Automation part is actually the worst. Automation part is actually the worst because, and this is typical most of a company, right? You have the application part, you have the network guy. In your network guy, you have your firewall guy, you have your DNS guy, and then you have your traditional network guy. That's three different teams. And you have the little guy in the middle who's your DevOps guy. He put a blame for everything because he's the one that's going to open the case. Guess what? He opened the case. He opened the network case. When you talk to him, it's like you're talking my tribe language to him, basically, because he has no clue about what you're talking about. He has no clue about what you're talking about. He cannot explain the issue, but he's the one that opened the case. And when you tell him, like, okay, this will be handled by your cloud network team, it's like, we don't have cloud network team. We have network team. Okay. and we have the DevOps team. So everything that we deploy on Azure are deployed. So you see that? You see that middle?
Yes.
You see that middle, right? So when you open the case and you tell them, like, okay, in order to properly troubleshoot this, I need your cloud networking guy on the call, your DNS guy on the call, and your network guy on-prem on the call.
Right.
You see all the three patterns? Guess who can handle all the three? The cloud network guy. He can handle all the three.
Yeah.
But that's what you see every day, Brian. That's what you see. And the DevOps guy is in the middle. Is like, okay, I have to create this application gateway. I'm like, okay, I know you have to create your application gateway, but between your application gateway and your backend, there's a firewall. Okay, that's probably not passing the traffic to your backend applications. So your probe are failing and you're getting the 502. You say, what is the 502? Okay, layer 7. He has no clue about the layer 7. So that's where it's like, okay, let me talk to my application team. That's probably 85% of the time.
So what if we could get a way for the DevOps people to incorporate into their dashboards and into their tools some data about the network so that at least they could understand when their application is slow or failing or not responding or whatever promotes them to pick up the phone, that they need to get the cloud network guy involved even prior to calling.
They don't have one. Remember, they don't have one.
Oh, they don't have one. So who ends up holding the hot potato to, like, let's take that scenario. You've built an application gateway. It's trying to talk to the back end. There's a busted, well, the firewall isn't busted, but there's busted security policy that's stopping that conversation. The poor DevOps guy, his app is down. He can't talk to the back end or the front end or whatever part it's trying to talk to. He doesn't have a cloud networking guy or gal to come in there and troubleshoot that. So really, are you saying that it's the DevOps person that has to go in and troubleshoot the ACL on the firewall? Or I guess my question is, in those instances where they don't have a cloud ops person, who ends up trying to solve it?
It's always on the DevOps dude because
it's always a DevOps guy.
Because he's the one that actually knows a little about the cloud.
Oh.
So they assume that he will understand everything. So, it's actually the link with the different teams. It's the link with the different team. But when you're a cloud network guy and are actually troubleshooting the scenario, the DevOps guy has no clue. He has no clue. And that's normal that he has no clue.
I see.
It's actually normal. Yeah, it's deploying codes that he doesn't understand. So you cannot ask him to do all that. If you really want him to do all that, you need to build the ground. But is that the role of the DevOps guy though? Is it really?
Yeah, no, not really.
So there you go.
Wow, man. So a couple things going on here. It's not fair to make DevOps people cloud networking experts, right?
There you go.
Cloud networking is way too complicated. In networking in general, right? It's specialized. But traditional networking people are, of course, not going to be super familiar with cloud networking operations and all those caveats and exceptions and special patterns we talked about. So two things. Businesses that are serious about putting business critical apps in the cloud need to find or hire or train an individual or a team to be a cloud networking expert, even if it's one individual and even if they use a partner or an SI or something for this. Two, there needs to be tighter collaboration between the DevOps team and these cloud networking experts so that when DevOps picks up the phone, he or she has someone right there beside them to help, complete the troubleshooting, to follow the motion so that the
Mhm.
DevOps person doesn't instantly have to become an expert in network security groups or something, or cloud firewalls. It sounds to me like there's just an absence in certain cases of cloud networking professionals. We just need more of them,
Yeah, we
or
don't need more
businesses
of them.
are training or hiring to satisfy that role, or it's really hard to find talent.
Oh yeah, it's definitely it's actually definitely hard because what I actually found out is there's not a lot of network engineer really keen to go into cloud, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not really much. The network has changed so much. Just following the track the last 7 years, right? The improvement from the network side, what has really changed besides of automation, probably the DevNet. Okay. We can say VXLAN. Okay. VXLAN. We
Yeah,
can say VXLAN can improve other things. SD1 too, right? SD1
yeah,
too, right? But that's still infrastructure. Okay. And you know what? It takes them too, because I would say like a lack of information, a lack of knowledge here is also costing company monies out there because when they don't have those network engineer, what is happening is I'm familiar with Palo Alto. He's familiar with Fortinet. Let's say you're familiar with Checkpoint. If you go to the cloud now and you have to build a pipeline over there, let's say you're building an infrastructure and everything, they're not going to pick what will be the best for the application, what will be the best for their design. No,
right.
they'll pick what they know. You know what I mean?
That's right.
They
That's
will
right.
pick what they know. So you ended up spending a lot of money probably on licenses on something that you're probably using like 15 or 20% of it because it's not the same firewall that you're going to apply everywhere, right? Here, you probably don't need that much instance, right? And you probably need like a couple instances here or back in there that can scale automatically, right? Or you probably need just layer 4 on a different place, on a different location. You might need more, or a different region, you might need more instance. And layer 70, right? You probably need like a TLS inspection or that kind of thing. But guess what? You're basically putting your checkpoint, your Palo Alto or whatever at every single location. Let's say you clusterize them, the license fee that you're using for that, the computing that you're using for that, because they come with a third-party iOS because they're changing all the instance, right? They're building up,
Right.
they change the instance, everything. So you have materials sitting out there working at probably 5% because you don't really need them. And you keep paying the bills for that just because they don't know.
I would see that all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. I would troubleshoot. And, when I was up at the architecture and the design bit of it in my previous role years ago, of course, we would still do our fair share of troubleshooting
Yeah.
because we were helping the field with proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
Because this was pre-sales. So we
Yeah.
had to demonstrate that their pattern or their design could work and hold water before they would commit. So there was a certain amount of troubleshooting that would go on there, actually quite a bit of it, a lot of it along the same lines as you. They just didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to put this together, or they weren't sure of all the different knobs or levers to turn. But I would see it all the time where I would say your traditional firewall is probably going to cause you a lot of heartburn. The way it's failing over behind the load balancer isn't
Mm-hmm.
appropriate for cloud. It's going to have a long convergence time.
Delicious
It's going to
time.
cost you a lot of money
When
because it's going to be expensive to scale, because the way that virtual machines count connections is different than the way metal counts connections,
connections,
right? Virtual machines count flows. Flow
flows,
levels are
there you go.
absolute. You get 1,000,000 flows per virtual
Mhm.
machine. Doesn't matter what SKU size because the network stack is intelligent. It's stateful,
It's
right?
stateful.
So every NIC is basically a layer 3 switch. And I would say this thing's going to tip over. Why don't we try to refactor your security platform in a way that's wholesome to cloud? Let's look at a cloud native firewall. Let's look at moving some of that intelligence into other cloud native things like layer 7 firewalls, like application gateways or network security groups. And they would say, we would love to, but we don't have time, or we don't have the political will, or we don't have the staff. We don't have the personnel to do that. We've
Yeah.
got one person that does firewalls. He or she's been trained on Palo Alto or Checkpoint or FortiGate for decades. It's going to take months for them to learn this new stuff. And we don't have time. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to take that Palo and go boom, 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 boom. We're going to put it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I felt for them, but they weren't giving me a wrong answer, or they weren't giving me an answer that felt disingenuous or stubborn. They were just saying, we're under the, what is it?
Yeah.
Like the stopwatch. We're under
Just don't
the egg
watch.
timer.
Yeah.
We've got
Yes.
3 months to get this off the ground, and we're just going to use our existing firewall.
Yeah.
Then the errors would come. The problems would come.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. They would have a failover event. It was a
Oh,
60-second convergent time on the floating IP, and they would go, we were down for a minute. And I would go,
Yeah.
well, I told you.
Traffic is not going by. Guess why? Why? The load balancer that you put of it has not connection problem. Yeah. So, and how do I fix it? You add IP addresses. Okay. The more IP addresses you add, it is like more thing that you're going to kind of try to work with. So you make things really way too hard for you, or
Yeah.
you replace all that with the native one. You don't need that load balancer anymore. You're done. And it's scaled automatically. It handles every single thing, but it still comes to that trust factor because they don't know it and they don't actually see what's going on behind the curtains. It's just hard for them just to go with it. So yeah, it's what it is.
So there's a rational part of me that understands why there's still a big hole in the heart of cloud networking, why it's hard to find qualified individuals, why it's hard to train them, why it's hard to skill them. And I get it. There's an emotional part of me that feels like I want to go to events and conferences or community networks or Reddit or somewhere and go, my God, if you want a career, if you want one of the best careers with infinite job security, get trained on cloud networking. Look at what we've talked about. Look how badly we need people, or cloud security, right?
Oh,
we
man.
need cloud experts that could go in
man.
there and say, man, I know how to use these cloud security functions.
Mhm.
You don't have to use Checkpoint, FortiGate, or Palo.
Mhm.
I know how to build it. I know how to support it. In fact, I've done it once before. I can do it in 1 month, and I'm going to save you so much money.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to me that cloud has been around almost for a decade now, and we're still now, not every enterprise, I don't mean to whitewash it.
Oh, yeah.
There are some enterprises that have tremendously talented cloud
Oh,
jobs.
yeah.
So it's not
Oh.
ubiquitous. But
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've told me that this is a daily thing for you. So
Yeah.
it's still happening.
It's
And
still
I
happening.
just,
It's
like,
still happening.
what is wrong with people? Why
It's still
we're a
happening.
decade into this,
It's still happening.
and I just feel like,
It comes from the top level because you have those IT managers, right? You have those IT managers, like, they're like, okay, what if it just don't work? What if it's one day it just break? Because, you have some issues where you open the door, you see your servers lining up, you feel like you have some issues when you see those servers lining up. Like, when you can actually come see the server, okay, it has a red light, let's change the disk on this one. I know that's it.
I remember, man. Yeah,
You know that
totally.
if I tell the disk, it gonna work. But now you're asking me to take everything that gives me money and go put somewhere they have nothing. So I have a portal basically. So no internet, I cannot see anything. If I know anything, I can't see anything. It's still a thing, to be honest. It's still a thing. So you need to be a visionary, to be honest. I think you should actually get out there and try to get more information, like, in order to change, because it's a process, right? It's a process. You can do this gradually, but people don't get it. And if you're not okay, you just put it back, right? It's a process. You can do this a process, but I think they don't know what they will gain from that. And it's going to be huge. The only issue that can actually happen here if you misconfigure something and it doesn't work. Because like I always tell customer, network don't wait. It either work or it doesn't. So it's not like it works sometime or it doesn't work sometime. If it works sometime and sometime it doesn't work, look at the compute. It's probably, you can't handle the traffic no more. So you need to scale that thing. Yeah, but it's not, you're networking. The route doesn't change from 480 to 443. No, yeah, it work or it doesn't. If you have an issue with your primary side, even the G allocation, you just build it like this. You push the code and everything is gone. Like after like 6-8 hours, you have brand new infrastructure with everything. Basically,
Right.
the time of recovery, the recovery time here is so short. I think managers, right, deciders, let's say stakeholders, they should just go with the wave, get more information, right? Start working their way to the cloud because it's the way to go.
So we talked a lot about, the challenges and
Mhm.
the frustrations and, where the rubber meets the road, which is why you're such an amazing guest on the show, because you are right where that rubber meets the road. But
Yeah.
there's good things happening too. So I kind of want to end the show like I tried to, always on a positive note. I'm sure you see customers that are doing amazing things and are successful. And I think you've kind of hit on them as we've gone through this journey together. Looks like some of the patterns for success are having people skilled up on cloud networking, good team coherence, having teams collaborate, automation, right?
Automation.
Embracing the future, getting skilled up on the ability to handle infrastructure as code so that you can
Mhm.
deploy and redeploy. Like you were saying, instead of taking 2 hours to troubleshoot something, you could redeploy it and have it up and running in 2 minutes. Are there any other patterns that you see for success where you see customers doing intelligent, amazing things that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, you have some customer amazing out there, like really. And I love those parts with customer because they know what they're doing. When they open the case, you don't have to go all over the place. It tells you
Yeah.
straight up, like, okay, this is it. I built it, and I know. So when you ask them, like, okay, where's your DNS at? Okay, it tells you exactly where everything it knows. So you already have those guys out there. They're quite a few. They're not a lot. It's not the majority, but you
Hmm.
have people out there doing things the right way. And when you have open communication with them, they can tell you, you can clearly ask them what is their challenges, right? The motivation behind is you can only grow with that kind of customer because they're pushing you. They keep pushing you
Hmm.
because they're doing things the right way. And when the first limitation is a real one, actually
Yeah.
is a real one. So I'm always open to that kind of customer. Like, how do you think we can make this better at this point? You definitely have customer out there doing some amazing thing, like amazing thing, really setting up things the right way. And when you ask them, how did you get there? Coming from the background that I had, I was a network engineer, but I had to do a lot of testing, a lot of labs. So it always comes down to the time that you have to put into the work to know, right? To understand it first and then know how to set it up the right way. Yeah, because you can set it up, but do you do it the right way? You're going to do it, you're going
Yeah.
to work. Are you going to be able to scan it up? That's a problem.
So these are customers that are indoctrinated in best practice. They've
Yes.
been through the iterations. They have kept up with the technology, with the changes. They have the right skill. They have the right training, and they're running
Oh,
their
yeah,
playbooks.
definitely.
Yeah. So it absolutely can happen. It's just, I guess it's just frustrating to me and probably everyone else that it doesn't seem like it's ubiquitous, that it's not happening like a tidal wave across the industry. But I think everyone will get there. Everyone has to get there, right? It's just
Oh,
some
yeah.
folks will take a little longer than others. So,
I think we're going to get there. What I do actually every single year, right around December, what I do is I go back on my cases and I kind of see the type of cases that I got based on what I got last year. Okay. I have some cases that I call quality cases that I build knowledge from. Okay. If
yeah.
I actually get more of quality cases, that means customers are getting better. Right. But if I'm still getting basic issues, that means there's something wrong. People are getting there. I just want them to, I will not say faster because I think they probably need to do it faster because it changes every day. It changes every day.
Well, Tchimwa, this has been super engaging and a lot of fun. And as always, I just love talking to all my guests. I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners have learned a lot too. So thank you for coming on the show. Best of luck, and let's stay in touch. I would love to have you come back on the show in a year, and we can figure out if those quality cases have indeed increased, and that gives us a good comfort that that people are learning and getting through this stuff. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You bet.